Splatoon 3 Side Order had some amazing bosses. Unlike Octo Expansion where it just recycled 2's fights, this DLC actually had unique bosses in its campaign, and man were they a ton of fun. The Splatoon series typically has really great fights to begin with, but the ones present here were especially good. In fact, I'd argue that a couple of them are some of the best fights the series has to offer. But when it came to deciding which one I felt was the best out of them, I was kinda having a bit of trouble determining that. So today, I thought, why don't we go ahead and go through each and every one of Side Order's bosses and rank them from worst to best. Now, something I should point out real quick, in case you haven't played Side Order, is the fact that you can play through the game with a variety of different weapons. As such, when you get to the bosses, certain weapons may match up against certain bosses, for better or for worse. For instance, the Charger may perform better than a brush against the Beyblade Tower over here. Also, depending on what kind of ability chips you get on the way can also majorly impact how the fight goes as well. Because of this, I'm not going to rank them with any particular weapon or gear set in mind. They will mostly be ranked on what my personal experience was. Which, yes, means opinions will be shared. So if a boss you like ends up being at the bottom of the list or something, well, just remember, it's just my opinion. It really doesn't matter anyway, I'm just some random guy on the internet after all. But hey, enough beating around the bush, let's just get started with the list. You know, it's kinda ironic that a boss you fight at the very top of a tower at the beginning of the game is at the very bottom of the rankings. Yeah, I'm putting Marina down in last, not exactly because her fight is bad or anything, but mostly because it's got the least going for it. In short, she's pretty much just a watered down version of the final boss. This isn't really too big of a deal, of course, after all, it's the first boss of the game and it's fought at the very end of the tutorial. Because of this fact, it kinda lacks its own identity and gets completely overshadowed. In fact, funny enough, I almost completely forgot to include this thing in the rankings when writing the script for this video. Yeah, I'm not kidding. So anyway, at the end of the prologue, once you manage to get to the top of the tower, this is what's waiting for you. Dear God, this is horrifying. Like, seriously, look at this thing. It's got Marina's head poking out the top with her freaking going all out with the jazz hands. And bro, she's wearing a set of goggles, which is straight up just a Virtual Boy controller. You know, now that I think about it, Nintendo's been referencing that thing quite a bit in the past few years in some of their games. What, is Nintendo planning on re-releasing it again or something? Is that what the Switch 2's gonna be? Okay, as for the actual fight, pretty much all you gotta do is go around to each of the spawners in the arena and destroy them. All the while fending off the enemies that appear and avoiding Marina's admittedly very slow attacks. After breaking all of them, her shield goes down and you're free to wail on her. Not killer whale, just regular whale. Unfortunately, this ain't Octo Expansion's finale. Besides that though, that's pretty much it. Like I said, there's really not much to it. But for a first boss though, it works decent enough. It's simple, quick, and a great way to end off the prologue. The only reason it's at the bottom once again is because everything above it just has more to it. I kinda have a mixed opinion on Overlorder here. On one hand, he's got a lot going for him, having a design that looks awesome, a really great battle theme, and I really like the fact he offers a decent challenge. As mentioned earlier, his fight is pretty much the same as Marina's except tougher. You do the same thing, break the 4 spawners around him, and then his force field goes down, allowing you to attack him. Except this time, Overlord's attacks are pretty ruthless, having access to plenty of specials that will tear your ass a new one. Especially the Reef Slider. My God, I cannot even count how many times that thing killed me. Now, all this makes for a pretty solid final boss in my opinion, but there are a couple things that kinda bring it down a bit. Just like Marina, the spawners will, spawn enemies. Why the did I write my script that way? That was so stupid. Now, the fact enemies appear during the fight isn't my main issue. After all, a lot of the other bosses have enemies spawn in them as well. It's just the fact that it spawns like a million of these dang things every 2 seconds. It's freaking annoying. You cannot take your time with this, because enemies will not only overrun you super quick, but on top of that, the spawners regen health over time, effectively undoing your progress. And in the later phases of the fight, they start running from you, making that healing factor much more annoying to deal with. If you're not able to effectively juggle dealing enough damage to the spawners, dodge all the insane attacks from Octoboy, and fight off the endless waves of enemies, this fight can be really annoying. And that's kind of the issue I have. I've had some runs of this fight that turned out to be really fun challenges and just overall great experiences. But others end up just being plain tedious due to the fact it would take forever for me to make any progress. Speaking of tediousness, I got some bad news for any of you completionists out there. If you want 100%, you gotta fight this dude 10 times. Once with each palette. And the fight is no different each time except for the weapon and abilities you use. At least with the other bosses you aren't guaranteed to get them every playthrough. This though, nah, you fight them every time. Now, parallel canon is honestly a pretty cool concept for a boss. The premise of doing battle against an opponent with the same abilities as you has always been a gimmick I've always enjoyed. In fact, Octo Expansion's final boss does exactly this, and I absolutely love that fight. Well, this time around, instead of fighting a single, evenly matched opponent, the game decided to say, how about an army of them instead? However, the coolness factor kinda goes away once you realize it's really not all that different from fighting regular Octolings in the other story modes from the other games. Also, their AI isn't really the greatest, and you could easily cheese the fight by spawn killing them since they always spawn in the same general area. Plus, on top of that, there's never really more than 2 or 3 of them on the field at once. All this kinda makes for a pretty easy fight. Like seriously, I honestly consider some of the other regular enemies in the story mode to be more dangerous than these guys. That's not exactly a good thing, just saying. I don't know, maybe after fighting Inner Agent 3 a million times back in Octo Expansion, it just made me really good at fighting Inklings and Octolings or something. Oh, no, 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 oh! Never mind. Despite it being on the easy side, I still really enjoy the fight. Fighting off hordes of enemies is always satisfying, and it has a really cool gimmick. I just kinda wish there was a bit more to it, though. I do have to say, however, I find it really hilarious that this thing's existence inadvertently fooled a bunch of people, including me, into thinking Agent 4 was returning when we saw its appearance on the official artwork. But no, she's unfortunately not in the game at all. She's only ever mentioned in some dialogue. That's it. Man, they really did 4 dirty. She's the only agent not to reappear in all of Splatoon 3. Like, seriously, what gives? What does Nintendo have against her? I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with me not putting this in first place since it seems to be the fan favorite of the bunch. It's the, Yeah, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that. I'm gonna just call it Rondo Mondo. You know, for some reason this dude kinda reminds me a bit of the Octo-Oven from Splatoon 2, in the sense that it's a giant towering boss that's outfitted with immense weaponry, but unlike the Octo-Oven though, instead of climbing up to the top of the boss to get it to the weak point, you gotta shoot this guy's segments to slowly tear it down. In another sense, you're letting your gun do the climbing for you. Mondo has a searchlight that will circle around the arena. If it spots you, well, all hell breaks loose. And if you think you're safe hiding under the actual tower, well, nice try, because it'll shoot shockwaves and spawn enemies as punishment. Your best bet is to play it like Metal Gear and hang behind walls and wait for an opening. I can 100% understand why people like this boss so much. It's super satisfying to tear down this huge beast one layer at a time, and it has a very unique stealth gimmick. However, it's not the only boss on this list that has a unique gimmick. We still got one more to talk about. So, in first place as the best boss in side order, we have a ball. Bruh. Barnacle Boy here is a very unique boss, so to speak. Even more so than Mondo. First off, bro here is covered in armor with only a very small opening on the front, making dealing damage pretty tough. Secondly, the boss itself doesn't really directly attack you most of the time. Instead, it mainly only counterattacks, kinda like a Wobbuffet if you ask me. Some of these attacks may include spawning enemies, shooting stingrays out the sides, charging at you, and straight up exploding. Shooting it causes it to move around based on the momentum you give it, in turn allowing it to attack. And you gotta be careful not to bump it into the bumpers on the floor, or else it'll shoot shockwaves and spawn additional enemies, and explode more. However, it can also be beneficial to do this as it removes the armor for a short time. As it takes damage, it'll break apart, getting smaller and smaller, which not only makes it faster, but also harder to hit. Going in guns blazing isn't a great idea in case you couldn't tell. Instead, it's better to take a more patient approach if you don't want to immediately get bodied. Wait a minute, I hate being patient. How do I like this fight so much then? I don't know, maybe it's the fact that this is the boss I got by far the least in my runs of this game, so I wasn't as burnt out on it like the others. And probably also the realization I had during this fight is that it essentially is like fighting a giant 8-ball. They made an 8-ball into a boss fight. That's sick! That means for any of you who had trouble with the 8-ball stages back in Octo expansion, you could finally get revenge for all the bullshit they put you through. That reason alone is enough to put it at the top of the list, but everything else also makes it just such a great fight in general. So yeah, that's pretty much my list. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think, and feel free to post your own list below as well. I'd love to see what your guys' opinions are. With all that being said, I'ma head out now. See you all later.